it open for comments from other participants. And this is a question about, do you have a system of consequences for good and bad behaviour, or classroom norms that you set up at the beginning of the term, perhaps? Anyone want to take that question first?
Yeah, I think contracts are very important, what are called classroom contracts. There's a couple of very good examples actually in a book called Dealing with Difficulties by Lindsay Clanfield and Luke Prodramou, if I get his name right, which gives you some ideas on that. But the basic idea is with young learners, that in that example, is that you sit down with the students and you negotiate all possible things that could happen and what they think the appropriate consequences can be. And it's surprising, again, if you give students that much responsibility, how seriously they take it, and then later enforce it. So that they've decided what the punishments are for chewing gum in class or speaking Spanish all the time or whatever it is, and they will refer to it and police it themselves, which, strangely enough, I think this is actually very useful with adult learners, especially in businesses. In fact, we have found, I don't know if there's a sort of sociological reason for this, that students in business are very similar to teenagers in the way they behave. My theory is that in both cases, neither of them are actually paying for the course themselves. In one case, their company is paying, and in the other case, their parents are paying. And in both cases, they're slightly unwilling participants. But it is quite bizarre sociologically that very often adults, a 40 or 50-year-old, behave like teenagers. Have you experienced that? And this is completely different to adults who have voted with their feet to come to a school and pay money where there's not really that issue. So the contract is also really important with these people as well, because their forms of disruption are different. You know, the kind of typical mobile goes off, they go out to answer it, or even better, they actually stay in the classroom and answer it. Have you had that one? And what do you do then? You know, that kind of stuff. They turn up late, they leave early, they show some lack of commitment and all that kind of stuff. So I think this idea of negotiating, making a contract, and doing it very seriously, yeah? Writing it down, putting it up as a poster on the wall, or sending it out as an email is the way to do it, and keep renegotiating.
Okay. It's funny, I have a kind of differing feeling on this, because although I tend to be against the imposing of rules with adults, because I find it goes against my grain of the way we should be working together in the classroom. On the other hand, I do have to say that I've noticed very much recently a decision by management with certain of our customers that before the beginning of any English learning courses, the manager, the learner, and then the training company, such as mine, sign a 3-part contract in order to guarantee commitment to the training. Because there's a little bit this problem of it's not me and not necessarily my investment. So there's the two elements that kind of go together. I think maybe the idea of getting commitment and sometimes formalizing that with a contract is what I've seen and what I feel is appropriate in the corporate world.
I'll never forget the sleepless nights that I had when I had unruly students last year, in fact, just last autumn. And I spent just horrible nights almost having nightmares about some of the situations that I was dealing with. Students who were quite open with their point of view. They were quite disruptive, in fact, very, very disruptive, and more than I could say. It went beyond my training, in fact, total learning curve. And so I went on the internet and I searched classroom management, and of course I saw Lindsay's book, and but was not able to really find, actually with the exception of one thing, on Classroom Management 101. It's an e-book, in fact, that I downloaded, and it's written by a kind of former, maybe it must be a former SEAL or a former FBI agent who's turned teacher. And he has videos on YouTube, and he's really in your face, tough. You know, he's like no nonsense. Don't give him any. You know, don't let him give him an inch. And for me, that was the extreme of where I wanted to go. However, the information that he has in his book and in his videos, he's right about something, and I want to reiterate what Duncan said, was that he sets up a contract with his unruly students, and you can do this almost at the middle. I was like, oh God, was this in the middle of the year? They're going to think I'm crazy. No. I set it up in the middle of the year even. I didn't wait until it was all over. I said, all right, I walked in the classroom and I said, here's your contract. And it was all in English, and I copied and pasted basically what I felt was useful from the 20 rules that this guy puts together, which are extremely strict, in fact. I took it and used it and adapted it to my environment, and I adapted it to what I felt I could be consistent with, and I felt I was comfortable enforcing in my classrooms. Of course, that was a huge challenge for me in keeping that going throughout the semester. And I said to my students, here's the contract. Translate it into French, get it back to me, and sign it. That is going to be the contract for the rest of the year. And they go, yeah, but nope, contract. No choice. Sorry, I'm the boss. And it's scary to say that. It's scary to say, no, sorry, you don't have a choice. I'm the boss, you're not. You're going to follow these rules. Very, very scary, but I have to say it has a complete 180-degree turn. The students are a joy. They abide by those rules. Sometimes they did, of course, try to push those rules, and I brought them back in. And let me tell you, it was a major learning experience for me. Very difficult, but that was a major turning point in my own professional development.
I look forward to finding out what the rules are for the reception. Well, can we have, once again, a young learner perspective?
Yes, sure. With my young learners at the beginning of the school year, we discussed the classroom rules and set the rules together instead of me telling them the rules. If it turns out to be a difficult class, I might use a system of consequences depending on the problems occur. And whatever system I use, I try to be consistent, which is difficult sometimes. Let me give an example of a system I use for good behavior. I use marble jar system, which I have here. I have a bag full of marbles, and there is a jar in every classroom. And the students get very excited even when they hear the sound of the marbles. You fill the jar with a couple of marbles when the whole class does something well or fully participate in the lesson. And when the jar is filled, you can do a fun activity or watch a film. This is the consequence. The system might not work for a long time, but it worked well in my classes for one semester. The second term I made a fresh start and introduced something else. Yes, and I also shared a couple of ideas on my blog at burcuakyol.com. A couple of ideas, classroom management ideas for young learners' classrooms that you can use.
Thank you very much. Can I just say that I find that some of the better teachers do the do's and don'ts with the classes, what we're talking about here, the classroom norms. And what is often helpful is if there's a visual representation of those rules, as a poster or posters, so that if somebody infracts the rule, if that's the way to describe it, you just sort of point at the rule. And I think just one thing I just also like to add, the importance of what some people call spatial anchors. So in other words, the teacher, if this is your space, that you stand in different places when you want different types of interactions to take place. So for example, there is a place where you stand, and when you stand there, the students know that's the end of their time together. There's a time when you ask questions. There's a place when you give input, etc., etc., etc. So it helps the learners through routines to know what kind of activity we are doing and what kind of activity we are now going to do because the teacher has changed place. Thank you.